It's Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Jeremy Thiesfeldt. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly. He was an elementary school teacher. He was a high school teacher. He is now chair of the Committee on Education. Education is your life.
Yeah, pretty much so. An awful lot of what I do involves the classroom.
And let's talk about the classrooms here in Wisconsin, focusing first on public education. As you know, the governor had proposed cutting funds to K-12 this budget cycle. But in the end, there was a decision made by the Republicans in the majority that that was not going to happen. And it appears that if you look at the math, there's actually going to be an increase in funding for education this cycle. What do you make?
Well, I think what you see that the governor was dealing with when he put his budget together was we were all hoping that there were going to be additional revenue was going to come in, and that didn't occur. It didn't mean we were short revenue.
Right.
Everything is on schedule. We just didn't get the additional amount that we were looking for. And when we have Medicaid, which has doubled in size according to budgets from about 2008, 2009 to where it is today, we're having a hard time coming up with the money to cover all of the needs that are in the budget.
Your friends on the Democratic side of the aisle would say, well, let's accept the Medicaid expansion. It will take pressure off of the state budget. Is there any appetite for that?
Well, on their side of the aisle,
right.
But the Medicaid promise is a false promise. Anybody who looks at the history of when the federal government makes you a promise that they're going to sustain a certain level of support, if you believe that promise, you're going to be disappointed pretty quickly. And we've already seen some evidences here and there involved with the whole Obamacare that the federal government is already starting to have to scale some stuff back.
And what's interesting about Wisconsin specifically is that in actuality, through BadgerCare, the coverage gap is not there. That the Medicaid recipients are receiving coverage, unlike other states that did not expand Medicaid.
That's correct.
So it's not quite as dire as one could argue.
Yeah, I just don't think it's wise management for us to subject the taxpayers of Wisconsin to that uncertainty that we'll be looking at in the future.
Well, we know, for example, is that while the federal government has said for expanding states they'll cover 100%, but that's only for the first couple of years.
Right.
And it's 90%.
Yeah,
80%.
well, and you see the trend.
And you see the trend. It's going in the wrong way.
And what happens a lot of times is you get maintenance of effort thrown at you as when you get those federal dollars, and that if you accept them, you're not allowed to scale back, or you have to get permission in order to be able to scale back, and it's very difficult to do. And so it's just not wise management of our state resources to put our taxpayers on the hook for something that the federal government has shown a history of not following through on what they said they were going to do.
So let's go back to education and talk about the restoration of cuts, I guess you could say. How are you feeling about that? You feeling as if it all ends well, that in the end, even though it was a little contentious, it worked out for the best for students?
Yeah, I'm upbeat about the decisions that were made by Joint Finance. Now, of course, none of this is final yet.
Right,
there's still,
as we speak today.
Still has to go through quite a bit yet, but usually these things hold. And I heard from my constituents, as well as most legislators heard from their constituents, that they felt that if we were going to make any changes to the budget, if we came up with any additional revenue, that should go into K-12 education. Now, not everybody feels that way, but those were, the polls that we sent out, our newsletters that we sent out, the phone calls that were coming in, by and large, put that at the top of the list. And then everything else kind of came after that. And so I'm glad that we were able to come up with some money to restore those cuts, as well as you said earlier, add a little bit extra to it.
I want to talk about the Voucher Program, and I'm speaking with someone who taught in a private school. So you have a sense of the education system from both sides. As you know, outside of Milwaukee and Racine, there is a voucher program in our state, in Wisconsin, where 1,000 students are able to attend a private school. They have to hit certain eligibility requirements, which is essentially being at a certain level of poverty. And their public school dollars will follow them to the private school. 1,000 students is not a very large number for a state the size of Wisconsin, and there has been discussion coming out of the governor's office to look at expanding the program. The governor would like to see the cap eliminated completely. I'm not sure where you come down or where others. What's your sense of the reform of the voucher program?
Well, I have always said I'm in favor of expanding the program statewide, and in the last budget, we were able to get that on a very small scale.
Right.
But in spite of that, it was a big step because it had been pretty well locked down to Milwaukee, and then we had added Racine in the budget before that. But going statewide with it was a big step. But obviously 1,000 students is inadequate for the need that was expressed out there. We had thousands more students than that who applied to get into the program.
And it's by lottery then?
Correct, correct. And so we wanted to make sure that we would be at least making a good, strong effort towards meeting the needs of those who were applying for the program. And so what Joint Finance came up with, and I'm supportive of what they came up with, was by using an incremental growth of 1% a year. So 1%, by percentage, I mean a percentage of the school district population. So in my district in Fond du Lac, we have about 7,300 students. So 1% of that is 73 students. The current program right now is right around that. And so now in coming years, each year another percentage gets added onto that. So 2% would be 146 and so forth, up until you get to 10%. And after that, after the 10% threshold is reached, then that cap would be eliminated. And what that does is it gives both the private schools who are getting into the program, and it gives the public schools who are also dealing with students who are going to go to a different school, it gives them time to adjust their budgets accordingly and adjust their staffs and their building requirements and so forth that they're going to need to operate a successful school.
Assuming this program does march forward as you described, it really is revolutionary. I mean, it will change the face of K-12 education in Wisconsin.
It is, but and it's not just Wisconsin though. You know, Wisconsin was the first state to start this back with Tommy Thompson in Milwaukee, 25 years ago or so. But once Milwaukee started a program, then we kind of stagnated, and other states passed us by. And so Wisconsin is kind of getting back in the game here in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of school choice movement across the country, because it wasn't just a Wisconsin thing. This is the movement in Wisconsin, and it's happening in other countries as well, that we need to give as many options as we can for parents to find the right school for their child.
But what's interesting about the voucher school choice debate is it's not cutting along party lines. It's not as if all Democrats are opposed and all Republicans are in support. It seems to be cutting along rural versus urban lines. The rural legislators, regardless of party, are nervous about it, whereas the urban legislators are more supportive. So given those interesting dynamics, how do you, as a supporter of reform, create a coalition around voucher reform?
Well, I think what you have to do is emphasize the point I said before, is that there are good schools out there that have been producing quality students and quality education for many years. And if we want to promote good schools and schools that are having success, then why are those schools not worthy of taxpayer support? And many of those schools are outstate. They aren't just in Milwaukee and Racine. And so we want to make sure that parents who want to be able to go to those, send their children to those schools, they're taxpayers too. Why should they not have that opportunity? Besides the fact that these schools are doing it for a less cost. No, it's no cut at the public education system. Many of them do a fine job, but the role of the state in education should be to provide as many opportunities as we can to have a good, solid education for these families.
In our final moments, do you anticipate reform soon on vouchers?
Well, I think what's in the budget right now is pretty well going to hold. I mean, what Joint Finance has put forward.
You'll come back?
Sure.
His name is Jeremy Thiesfeldt. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for joining us on Charter Local Edition.